Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Yes, today I'm finally making Great Russian Writers video part 2. Many of you have been asking me to continue with this topic, and actually this video series along with the video about Leo Tolstoy are among the most viewable on my channel. Thank you so much for all your comments. It's so wonderful to see how many people all around the world enjoy Russian literature and even learn Russian. It's so great to connect with a culture through literature, and that's exactly what we're gonna do together right now. Some of you here may already know that in the first part of this video series I was telling you about some of the most well-known Russian writers: Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Gogol, Chekhov, Bulgakov, etc. And today I thought it'd be good to tell you more about those writers that are not so much famous, but still it's essential to know about the works they created. Let's just have some tea and let's begin with the first writer, which would be Ivan Goncharov. A Russian novelist with such an easy Russian name and surname, who was born in Simbirsk, which is now Ulyanovsk, the birthplace of Lenin, by the way. His contemporaries were Pushkin, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, and other famous people. And in that circle it seems like Goncharov was undeservedly underestimated, even though many of those writers mentioned above spoke of Ivan Goncharov as the author of a great talent. There are three major novels of Ivan Goncharov. The Same Old Story, which by the way has a lot of translations. It may be translated as The Ordinary Story, The Common Story. Another novel is called Oblomov, the one I'm reading these days, by the way. And there's also The Precipice, the last novel of Ivan Goncharov that took him about 20 years to complete. But the novel which deserves to be looked at more closely is the one I'm rereading these days and which made its author famous, Oblomov. The novel, written in 1859, tells us about quite a rich merchant, Ilya Ilyich, who lives with his servant and doesn't really do anything. He leads a monotonous life, doesn't lose a chance to stay in bed up until midday or even much later, and yes, he's totally lazy. Ilya Ilyich is honestly sorry for those people whose life is full of exciting moments, meetings and work. At the first glance it may seem the life of the merchant Ilya Ilyich is too boring and he's just a bore, but in reality this character is depicted as a man with a pure soul, who hasn't done anything wrong and hasn't said a bad word about anyone as well. Such a complicated mix of traits made the personality of Oblomov quite popular because many people recognized themselves in it. Just after the novel was published, it became popular, and after some time, such a word as Oblomovщина, which in English I guess would be Oblomovism, was coined, which meant the state of laziness that doesn't let you do anything, a lack of that wish that actually let you start doing something, passive lifestyle, so to speak. And I'll tell you even more. When people started noticing that little Oblomov in themselves, some understood that Oblomovism was not just some word, but it was a real trait of Russian national character. Even nowadays, this Oblomovщина can be seen in many Russians, and this exact word is often used. The most important thing, I guess, here is to understand the real meaning of this word, Oblomovism. It doesn't mean at all any kind of depression which doesn't let you do anything in your life, but it's more likely about daydreaming, when you dream about a wonderful life, but then you just suddenly wake up and you understand that the life is not so wonderful, but you don't have any wish to change it. Then you start to create many excuses, saying that you don't have time to change anything in your life, you're too busy, and you decide to keep on living your passive life. I do believe that this Oblomov effect does not happen to only us, Russians, but it can happen to anyone out there, right? Nowadays, the thing that I can really see in Russia is that there are really a lot of elderly people who live in a constant Oblomov mode. It's just when people retire, they think they have come to the end of their life and the only things they have is a sofa and a TV. Really, there are few people who, after they retire, keep on doing anything. I mean, activities, hobbies, traveling or just walking outside. For the majority, it seems like it has all gone. That's something really frustrating, I have to tell you. But thanks Ivan Goncharov for showing us and reminding us such a thing as Oblomovism that can lead to not very good things. Who, by the way, sometimes associated himself with Oblomov. Maybe that's why it took him like 20 years to finish his last novel. And he never got married and had his own family. But at least he wrote some good novels. Okay, let's have a look at another author I would like to talk today, Ivan Bunin. This Russian writer is especially famous for being the first author from Russia to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. Born in 1870 in Voronezh, Bunin first found himself as a poet and published some collections of poems. At that time when it was fashionable to express revolutionary ideas, not to be afraid of being different and thinking differently, Ivan Bunin was seen as a poet of a traditional style. And, by the way, talking about the revolution, Bunin was totally against it and even took one of the leading positions in anti-communist groups. The thing we have to pay attention to is the short stories of Bunin. If you're a Russian learner and you feel pretty confident to read something in the original, then pay attention to these short stories. And Dark Avenues deserves to be highlighted. It is considered to be a masterpiece of Russian literature and is completely devoted to love. Another novel is The Life of Arsenyev, which is interesting as well because it has many autobiographical parts. Bunin, by the way, migrated later to France in 1920 because of the political situation in the country. There he continued writing and publishing his stories and became very popular, especially after receiving the Nobel Prize. In 1953, Bunin died because of heart and lungs failure, but it doesn't mean he was forgotten in his homeland. His books were published in Russia even at the time the author was still abroad. Nowadays, his works are read in schools and there's no one here who doesn't know his name. Well, now let's come to the next author, shall we? But it'll be more fair to call him a poet, more likely. Nikolay Nekrasov. This person, apart from being an author of many amazing poems, was quite an influential person as well. Part of liberal and radical Russian circles, Nekrasov was an editor and director of a fairly successful, at that time, literary and political magazine Современник, The Contemporary, which was, by the way, founded by Pushkin. Nekrasov made Современник even more popular and widespread. It was exactly him who opened the way to the world literature to such young talents as Ivan Goncharov, whom you already know. He published his common story exactly there for the first time. Also, Leo Tolstoy, he published his trilogy Childhood, Boyhood and Youth exactly in Современник. But as the revolutionary atmosphere was filling the air, plus in 1861 the Tsar Alexander II made the manifest abolishing serfdom of Russian peasants, to which Nekrasov reacted with really negative comments, all that revolutionary propaganda was totally prohibited by the government, and the magazine Современник had to be closed forever in 1866. And when I said Nekrasov reacted negatively to the manifest of the Tsar, I didn't mean he was against the freedom of the peasants. No, on the contrary. It was just because that manifest and the end of the serfdom did not really happen. Nekrasov thought that that manifest was only another way to make peasants work. And he would continue with this topic many times. The major work of Nekrasov about the peasant's life is called Who Can Be Happy and Free in Russia, which he started publishing that same year, 1866. The literal translation of this epic poem would be Who Can Live Well in Russia, though this work still remains very well known, which I recommend you to check out, even though there aren't many English translations. Before we continue, I want to show you some handmade beauties I made these days. Some of you already know how much I love handmade, and here is my new collection of Russian writers, the ones you know for sure. You can hang these mini embroideries on the wall or else just put it on your desk. For a true fan of Russian literature, it must be an awesome gift. And also, I'd like to show you my new floral collection of notebooks. I made each of them in a cross-stitch technique. These little ones you can use for writing down your notes, maybe some thoughts after reading a book. And there's also this amazing notebook, a bit bigger, with an embroidered print as well. Will be great to use as a notebook for book reuse, for example. Get any of that if you like on my Ko-fi account. Click on the link in the video description, and also there you can, by the way, support my channel if you find it interesting. Okay, and now let's come to the next writer, another Ivan Turgenev. Considered by many one of the major authors of the 19th century, Turgenev was not only a Russian novelist and short story writer, but also a translator, playwright, and the man who popularized Russian literature in the West. Turgenev was born in Oryol, but later the family moved to Moscow, where the future writer entered the University of Moscow and then the University of St. Petersburg. Ivan Turgenev was very interested in education and even got the honorary degree of Doctor of Civil Laws at the University of Oxford. Among his contemporaries were Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Gogol, and other great Russian writers. With some of them, Turgenev, by the way, didn't get along well. With Tolstoy, for example, he had been at odds for like 17 years. But then, luckily, both agreed to forget all their conflicts they had. In general, Turgenev knew almost all the literary circle of Russian writers at that time, and it was thanks to him Russian literature got popularized in the West. Turgenev went to Germany, England, then he stayed in France for many years where he worked as a translator. He explained he couldn't live near the thing he detested more than anything in his life, which was serfdom. Turgenev was a convinced liberal. In many of his works, Turgenev described a real life of peasants, along with nature and forests. And a perfect example of that would probably be Sketches from a Hunter's Album, that is more known as a Sportsman's Sketches. That was the first major work of Turgenev that made him well known. The Sketches from a Hunter's Album was based on the author's memories and thoughts of hunting in the forest near his mother's estate. Other and more major works of Turgenev, which I really recommend you to have a look at, are short stories. A short story called Momo, that's a horrific story of a peasant and his dog that is called Momo, which, by the way, always makes me cry. I don't want to spoil now you all the plot. Just have a look at if, by the way, if you are learning Russian, and again, if you feel confident and have at least intermediate level, you can try to read this short story in the original. Well, and maybe the most important and the greatest work of Ivan Turgenev is Fathers and Sons. On the whole, the novel shows how two generations, the old one and the younger one, do not understand each other. The old generation, fathers, do not want to change anything. Meanwhile, the younger generations, sons, pro-revolution, pro-nihilist movement. The novel got its fame not only in Russia, but in the West it was also highly acclaimed. Before making the video, it took me some time to think what authors I was going to mention, because really, Russian literature sometimes seems to be endless. It was really hard to pick up 4 or 5 Russian writers only. There are a lot of other ones to talk about. The authors I've mentioned today are also in the list of Russian classics, but as I said, they are not so much famous as Tolstoy and Dostoevsky outside of Russia, which is not quite fair for those of you who are learning Russian or are just interested in literature. I hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me in the comments what book you're going to pick up from those I've mentioned. Thank you for watching till the very end, and see you as always in the new videos on LanguageEasy.